For more on the turmoil in Iraq, I'm joined in the studio by Matt Southworth. He's an Iraq War vet working for the Friends Committee on National Legislation. And interestingly enough, back in 2004, you were in this general area. That's 10 years ago.
That's right.
I mean, it must be shocking for you to see the images coming from that area now.
It is, and what's most concerning is the idea that we're going to double down on failed military strategies. We look at the campaign, President Obama today saying we don't quite have a strategy yet. That is very alarming. We think about what's at stake for the civilians in this area, and the only way to marginalize ISIS won't be through bombs.
Well, it's interesting for a man who used to be in uniform. That must not be comforting to hear the commander-in-chief say we don't have a strategy. I mean, what were your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, it's astonishing to me. I mean, we have a multi-trillion-dollar security establishment, military establishment, and the idea that we are actively bombing a country, not knowing what the objectives are, not knowing what we want out of these operations is really curious. I think part of the problem is the situation is so muddied. People have asked me, do you think we missed an opportunity to bomb Syria last year? And I say, no, we missed an opportunity to engage in regional diplomacy and global diplomacy. And that is what's lacking in this policy. The president says there's no military solution, yet we continue to bomb, and there's no complementing strategy for political reconciliation.
Well, in some respects, the more bombing, the worse the enemy looks. I mean, when you were there in 2004, the thought of ISIS probably never even crossed your mind, and we keep seeing these brutal images from this group. They seem, as he himself said, beyond the pale.
Right. Yeah, and it's the depth of the sorrow I feel for the people caught in the middle of this. To me, this is a reason for the U.S. to open a sort of a political asylum status for people who are fleeing this conflict. Same thing with people, countries in the EU and maybe even Turkey and others in the region, to absorb some of the people who are fleeing this chaos and violence. If we don't have this strategy for political, deal making somewhere along the line, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. This, group, Islamic State, is not going away.
Interestingly enough, though, the president did have some comments about ISIS, and I'd like to play them for you and then get your reaction afterwards. So let's listen into what the president had to say.
This should be a wake-up call to Sunni, to Shia, to everybody, that a group like ISIS is beyond the pale, that they have no vision or ideology beyond violence and chaos and the slaughter of innocent people. And as a consequence, we've got to all join together, even if we have differences on a range of political issues, to make sure that they're rooted out.
Sounds simplistic, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it?
Well, it absolutely is. You know, ISIL, ISIS, the Islamic State, the core of that group is around 20,000 fighters. What is pushing people into fighting with them is the choice of self-preservation over death. And I think that's something we really need to weigh here. We need to think about what would pull people back out of that dynamic. And it's not further militarizing our policy or the violence in the region. And in addition, it goes without saying that the people who are right now fighting in Syria and Iraq are victims of their own circumstance. They've endured decades of war themselves. You've got people who have grown up in refugee camps who feel completely wronged. And what that does to the human psychology, what that will do to the sense of hopelessness, I can only imagine. But I think it's way too simplistic to just say, hey, these people are beyond the pale. They're murderers and they're this and they're that. I think it's really important that we step back and say, what are we trying to achieve and how do we get there? And I'm certain, based on my own military experience, that bombs won't get us there.
All right, Matt, thanks so much for coming in, offering your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.